Back to another episode of International Immersion, a podcast that seeks to capture the combined experiences of people, culture, places, traveling, current events, living abroad, and everything that comes along with them. For today's episode, we have my friend Jing back, who in our previous episode, we talked about what it was like for her to go from China back to the US during the current COVID-19 pandemic. An interesting caveat, now we're going to discuss with her today what it's like doing the opposite. Her return journey from the US back to China and all the hurdles and steps that she had to go through to complete that. So Jing, it's great to have you on today. I hope you're doing well from currently in quarantine, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so right now I am in quarantine. It's a city outside of Shanghai. It's like an hour away, and it's in Pinghu. It's in Zhejiang province.
I see. So when you flew back into Shanghai, Pudong.
Right. So there are probably only like 5 cities, I think, that are receiving American flights. So they are Chengdu, Shanghai, Beijing, Xiamen, Shenzhen. I think those are the only cities that are receiving incoming US flights. And I think because they're, in different parts of the country. So, and then people kind of are quarantined in these places. And then of course from other countries like Korea, they can fly into other cities like Harbin. But as far as US flights, I think it's only connecting into these 5 cities.
Well, in a way that makes sense because, they definitely want to control the inflow and outflow of people, and they can monitor and make sure that they don't, cause another outbreak in any of the places. So that makes sense. And I can even see how they can do this with different countries and different places or certain places for, so on and so forth. So to kind of, to begin
I think they have a really good system in place.
Well, that's good to know because I know a lot of people are not that aware of what's going on exactly. If you do fly into mainland China right now. So I think what you're going to tell us this evening will be very useful and I think quite informative. So to begin with, you flew back to the U.S. You're in the U.S. for quite a while, and then you just plan to head back to China. What was the first step that you had to go through, the planning phase?
It was very confusing because, there were different information out there. I was lucky that a friend connected me with another friend who recently returned in January. And then that person was in a WeChat groups, like returning WeChat groups from United Airlines. So people started, I guess, when they know who, they start creating WeChat groups, like the United Airline flies out of San Francisco. So there's a San Francisco WeChat group. I was lucky enough to be pulled into this group. And from there, I got the information where to get the COVID, how soon you should get it, what not. So in this group, I found out the best place to get the COVID was at this place called Apostle Diagnostics in San Jose. They were the cheapest and they had a good record of people getting it and was successful in obtaining the green code. And then, so from that San Francisco United group, I got into the Apostle Diagnostics group, which is the group that does the COVID testing. And then, a lot of people write about their experience. So I got to read about other people's process through these groups, which was very good because I think they were also rewarding people for writing the best articles. So they get some type of reward. So people were motivated. And a lot of people I found that really just wanted to share this experience and want to help each other. That's
a very good thing to know that people are promoting it and they're, recollecting their accounts of the travel, the steps and everything, because I found with a lot of things, the best way to prepare is to talk to people or get from word of mouth or via comments, reviews, and WeChat groups or social media groups.
Yeah, and I feel like through this experience, I definitely see people are more willing to just step up to answer questions, to help each other out. We were all strangers in a group, and just to see a lot of people willing, like even sometimes I post questions and people will respond to my questions and we don't know each other, right? And I just felt that community was so good. And it's like during times like this to see people coming together and help each other, I think is very valuable.
No, that's something that's very, very heartwarming to hear. And I wish on a larger scale it was going on across a wide range of topics and situations and current events. So, okay, so you basically started off by using the social media group and finding a good lab to get your results done. So once you had your test results and you had a lot of this background information, what next did you need to do?
From my research, I knew that my visa was one that's would qualify me to return. So upon having a work visa, work permit, I just kind of just bought my ticket and just gone with the process flow, right? So you have to get your COVID, which is the PCT, I think, or PCR. It's the one that the nasal swab. And then you have to get the antigen test, which shows if you've ever had COVID. So you have to get double negative. So negative from your swab that shows if you currently have COVID, and then the antigen test shows if you've ever had COVID. So right now they're not taking people who recovered from COVID because based on the antigen, and then they're not taking anybody who has COVID at the moment.
I see. So basically, they're basically wanting, I would say, a double layer of protection. They want to make sure you don't have it currently, right. And if you've ever had it, then you're excluded from returning. So, and you mentioned that yours is one of that's basically visa eligible to return?
Yes. Right now, the people that are allowed to return are people who's holding work visa, and then people holding kind of like in Chinese they call it 人道, but in English, I guess if I translate it, it would be like for good cause, right? For example, NGO maybe. And then for people whose family members in China are super sick and they need to see them.
I see. So kind of a mix of like if they're in certain industries or jobs where it's deemed a benefit or helpful to the situation or to whatever they're doing, or if they have family who, are suffering a family emergency or something along those lines.
Yeah, so family emergency, and then for Chinese citizens.
I see. And then, of course, if you're a non-Chinese citizen, they're pretty sure that would exclude you down to simply work visas.
Right. Yeah, so you can't go for tourism, and I don't think students are allowed as well.
Okay, so just work. I'm actually a bit surprised that work visas would be allowed, but not students. But then again, I think there are more students than workers, so that would make sense at least in one aspect.
Yeah. So the tricky thing was when I followed the procedures and then I got my test results, which were double negatives, and I then there was a link where you submit the documents. So you have to take a picture of you with your sample, okay, and then you have to submit your visa, your page, your passport page, and your negative results, so etc. So there's like a list of documents that you need to submit onto this link, right? So I did that, and then we have this WeChat group where there was already 100 people in this group who took the tests from Apostle Diagnostics, right? So people started posting, of they got the code or they didn't get the code or they've been waiting for a long time, what's happening. So everybody's just expressing, their anxiety into this group. And, I'm in this group and I've submitted my results. So I got the result around 6 o'clock. So I got the test. I went for the test at 11 o'clock was my appointment. I got the result by email around 6 o'clock. Right.
Oh, that's quite fast.
So it's $400.
Oh, that would explain it. Yeah, I mean that's an expensive test. So they better have it done pretty quick if I'm paying that kind of money for it.
Yeah, it's expensive. It's an expensive process. Okay, so that's $600. I mean $400 for the 2 tests, and then my flight ticket back was $2,600.
Oh my dear Lord.
So it's a $3,000 process, okay? So
and you haven't even got into the steps of what you need to do once you arrive.
And
so that's crazy.
Yeah, and that doesn't even guarantee me to come back, right? So
my goodness.
Imagine if I didn't get the negatives, right? So it's like, okay, I kind of just threw that $400 away. And some people they got a false positive and they will have to pay again for another test. And that's why they give us 2 days to do it, because 2 days before the flight, because if something happens, if there's a hiccup,
you have a chance to correct it.
Right. So you have
a lot of people do get false positives, as they say.
Huh?
Because a lot of people have gotten false positives, and it may freak them out.
Right. Yeah.
We tested. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm safe. But yeah, that would panic a lot of people. Unfortunately, I know I do.
Right.
I'm concerned if I
Right.
I'm positive.
Yeah.
That can't be right. And then, oh, okay, I wasn't, but
Yeah.
it still
Yeah.
doesn't calm you down.
Right. And I think the good thing about Apostle, I think they offer retest if if you tested positive. But anyways, I've heard of one case, like I've read of all the cases that I read one case where somebody was, tested positive, and then they had to go to another. They actually went to a different place to retest, right? So they paid twice
Oh, wow.
to get the because they just, after they get positive, they just don't trust this place anymore. So then to be safe, they just went to a different place. So that's one case study that I read somewhere. But anyway, so then, I was out. So I post my results at 9:00, and then I started panicking because I'm like, oh no, like all these people have starting, they were getting the results. They were getting the green code, which allows them to board the airplane. And here I am, I waited and I waited and I waited, and I keep refreshing. So I think by like 12:00 a.m., I was like really worried because, the most people in the group has gotten it, and then there were a few that hasn't. And then, they were asking why, and then people were trying to calm them and saying that, oh, maybe, the embassy employees, they end work at 9:00 p.m.
Oh no.
So, you're too late. So, just be patient, they'll get through it. And most people, they'll get through it. So then, I went to bed worried, but then, I went to bed. I woke up the next morning and I was rejected.
You got to be kidding me. So you did all that and you were rejected.
Yes, I was rejected, saying that, and then they gave a reason. And then,
well, they better
so first they didn't give first they didn't give a reason. And then I went to the group. I said, I was rejected, and they didn't give a reason. And they said, oh, that's not possible. They always give a reason. Just resubmit. So I resubmitted everything the next morning. So I woke up at like 8:00 and I resubmitted everything, and then they rejected me again. And then this time they gave me a reason. They said that I am non-essential, that my cause for leaving is not important enough, right? So they have the right to reject me. So I started to panic. And so I went back to the WeChat group. I said, they rejected me because they said that I am not essential. So did anybody else, have this,
get the same response, or
get the same response, and how that was dealt with, right? So someone responded, and then I said, it's because I'm a US citizen, I'm not Chinese. And they were like, oh, well, everybody here is Chinese. And then one person came, her WeChat name was like Diana. So she came up, she said, oh, well, she's American citizen and she got approval, but she had to email and get approval way ahead of time before she went through the process of buying her plane ticket and getting the COVID. So she said, and then she sent me an article from the embassy saying that you should get an approval first. You should get, regardless of your visa type, you should get an approval first, and then with the approval, you move on. Otherwise, you're going to get rejected, or you have the risk of being rejected. So,
I see.
and this document came out in February, so I didn't see it. So, and of course, in the WeChat groups, I wouldn't know this information because majority of the people are Chinese nationals, so they don't have this issue.
Yeah, I find, especially for my time in China, a lot of these things, it's like you can do it, but you're at a huge disadvantage compared to the locals. I think this is the case in a lot of countries, but just getting stuff done, there's just you can't do the same thing the locals can in China. Like when it comes to buying tickets,
right,
or a lot of things, you just can't do the same thing, or it's not expedient.
Yeah. So I started panicking. And then some people said, oh, someone said to me in the group, said that, oh, it took her coworker 3 months to get the approval. And I'm like, I can't wait another 3 months. So I started panicking. I emailed my school, and the school was on vacation that weekend or that week. So it was like really bad. I emailed my HR. I said, okay, this is the situation now. So I need you to write me a letter explaining that I am essential to the to the school. And so she was like, oh, but then, I don't have a stamp because, there's no official stamp because they're not in school. They are on break. So then, I got the consulates. I got several email addresses and phone numbers for the consulate. So I just sent all the, the email addresses. I said, well, just send an email to all these email addresses. Like there were like 3. And then
To try to
I
get some type of
asked,
response from them or see what could be done.
yeah, so then my school wrote, my HR wrote, and then I kind of just copied the letter into Word document, PDF'd it, and then, and add that to my file. And then I told my husband to write as well. So my husband wrote to explain that, aside from work, my husband is a Chinese national, and we have two children that need their mother, right? So
And
it's
that
beyond
there
work,
I think
right? It's a
is a strong
family.
argument because you have,
Right, exactly. So yeah, so that was the argument. And then I wrote to the consulate, to all the email addresses, explaining my situation, and that, it's not just because of work, but I have children. I have children that are there, and that, this is the stronger need, is the most important need. And then they still rejected me.
Are you serious? So after all this,
Yeah,
your
so
husband who's a Chinese
after,
national, your school, and they
yeah,
still rejected you.
right. So you should see my email to them was like, explain my situation, and then it was like 18 attachments of like all these documents, even my husband's ID, passport, my kids' information, just to let them know that I have a Chinese husband and I have children in China, and they are 4 and 6. They're very young, and I need to be with them,
They
right?
need their mother.
And then yeah, and so they rejected me. So this is like the third or the fourth time they rejected me. So I quickly respond again. Then this time I responded with why I came back to the US during this time, and that I came back because my sister was terminally ill, and I had to come back, and I didn't have a choice, right? And I had to run the risk to come back. And then I explained that, and now I really wanted to return because my sister had passed. So I just explained it, just was very raw, and, hoping that they would really understand the emotional reasons, right? And then the need for this trip for me to come back to the US, and then for me to return. So then they responded with, okay, well, can you prove your sister's death?
Are you serious?
Yes, and your relationship, right, to prove that you were indeed related, because I guess they needed to see that I did return for a good reason. I didn't just come back for a vacation. I didn't just come back, for something.
You didn't come back for the sake of
small.
coming back. You came back for a family emergency.
Right. And then that my coming and going really is a legitimate reason, and that they should approve, right? So I can understand that. Fine. So then I was scrambling because I'm like, gosh, how can I prove my relationship with my sister? This is like really difficult. So I just started thinking, so I called my mom. I said, okay, on her death certificate, there are names of my parents. And I'm like, okay, are there any documents that has my name and my parents' name, right? So as long as all the names match up. So, and there was one. So there was a document from a long time ago that just happens to have that to state that, I am the daughter of so-and-so. And so then finally, I submitted these two, the death certificate, and then this document that shows my relationship between me and my parents. So then I submitted it, and then the lady, and then they didn't respond. So then I emailed them again. I said, can you please, I'm very worried that I'm not able to fly tomorrow. My family are very concerned. My kids are waiting for me. Can you please, give me the approval? And then the lady, I assume it's the lady, but anyways, the person responded that they have submitted this document, and they're doing an emergency kind of like a check, like they're trying to expedite it for me. So I was very grateful for that response, because that response usually gives you that 70%, right? Because when they respond like that with the Chinese people, the government, I feel like when they respond when they give you a positive response instead of one of those like 50-50 response,
mm-hmm.
if the response is positive, usually you'll get it.
I'm just saying, from listening to you, this is just, that's it's just so unreal, because you had to go through so many steps. You had to re-inquire, send this, send that, update, do this again. It's just, not to mention tedious, but man, they had to be emotionally and mentally draining.
It was very emotionally. It was very emotional. It was such an emotional day that day. I broke down, and I even written to them so emotionally too, because, and my colleague told me that I had the advantage of being fluent in Chinese, so I could quickly respond, and I wrote in their language, right? So,
oh yeah, that definitely would be of assistance.
Yeah, it helps so much because I was very emotional and I wrote to that person, who's receiving my emails. I said I'm already very heartbroken by my sister's passing, and I said all I want right now is just to go home to my family and to be with my children. So I was like really just expressing that desire.
You were trying to emphasize just what you've been through and tell them that, look, I've been there a while. I came back from emergency. I just want to go back because I want to see my husband and kids. There's nothing more
on the
basic
on a human level
than that.
Yeah, and just get down to the raw human level instead of this administrative level, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I am grateful, and I feel like they were being very human about it. They were being very, understanding about it, right? From their response, from at first was very hard, like, no, this is not a good reason, and we have the right to reject you, to like, okay, we are working on it, please be patient.
Yeah, they went through different phases from flat no to okay, we're looking into it, to finally, because you're back there now, they finally did approve it. So kind of moving on from this now, you kind of really, so once you did get the approval, you'd already booked the flight, correct?
Yeah, I had already booked the flight. So my husband had a different argument. So I feel like here's a cultural difference, and also like how you see it, because my husband was like, well, he wasn't going to go for he wasn't even going to tell them. He suggested that I shouldn't tell them that I have booked the flight. He said that, well, if you tell them you've booked the flight, then they will be like, well, you should have gotten approval. So because you booked the flight, we're not going to give it to you because you didn't follow protocol. But my argument was like, no, I booked the flight. I've already booked the flight. I didn't know. And here's my reason. And please, I must board tomorrow. So this is an emergency. So he and I took a very different approach. I was like, no, I just honesty, just honest. Like, yes, the document said to not do anything until you get the approval. But the reality is I didn't know about that, and I did it. So this is what I did. So can you please just allow me to
process it, approve it, and let me come back.
Right. Yeah. Because I feel like if they didn't know that I booked the flight, they might not even give it to me, because they're like, okay, well, it's going to take a few days. You know what I mean? Like,
whereas that would give them like, she's already booked the flight. So,
yeah,
it's more dire. It's not, I need to come back, but I haven't even booked a flight. So yeah. And that's interesting how you kind of delved into both you and your husband's approach to it. I mean, everyone of course may have a different thought process about doing something, but that is interesting that you bring that up. So moving on now, you've got your flight, you've got prepped. So moving on to the day of boarding and then to the flight itself. How is that?
All right. So I was actually pleasantly surprised. Well, not pleasantly, but there were definitely a lot more people this time around returning. There were a lot more people going back than coming. Okay. So I decided that, well, because I saw that there were so many people, and I wasn't sure if I was on a row by myself this time, or there would be I would sit with other people. So I kind of just, let me backtrack. So I got to the airport. Okay. So I got to the airport, and then, you have to show your green code. And then there is another declaration code that you have to fill out through the QR code. So you scan the code, you get another, it's like it's red. So you get the green code and you have the red code. So you once you get both, so you have both, and then you show the you show the person at the ticket counter, and then the person issues you the ticket, right? So then I got my ticket, I went in, I checked in, and then the airport this time definitely had a lot more people than when I arrived. So that's one difference. Secondly, there were a lot more people boarding the flight to go back to China than coming. I would say at least double, if not triple.
Oh, wow. Okay. So a lot more people returning to China, but not leaving China. at least from your experience.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Right. And I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, especially if a lot more
yeah.
Chinese here wanting to return home, but I can definitely see why that makes sense. So once you
Well, no, because the pandemic is not as bad in China. So most people, if they can stay in China, they'd rather stay in China right now.
I see what you mean.
Right. Because, we're like mask free, right? We're free to move about, and there's not much of a fear of the pandemic in China overall.
That's good to know. I think a lot of people should be aware of that, of just different states of reality in both places. So
yeah, it's definitely safer in China right now in terms of pandemic and control, in terms controlling the pandemic. So I think that's why. So more people, if they will want to be in China.
I see. Okay.
Despite the stress of traveling.
Naturally. So once you've got everything and you're checked in, so you go through customs, and then you get to your gate and you board. So basically same as normal, just paperwork, processing, making sure you have all your information and then everything is clear, correct?
Right. So, and the flight that I came with, so I see if they were empty, rows. So, I was sitting on a row of 3, right? So A, B, C, and then I was at C, someone was at A. So I was like looking around, and then I saw an empty row. So I kind of just moved to an empty row by myself again this time. So I'm grateful that worked out, because it was definitely a much, much fuller flight. There were most people set with other people in the row.
So unlike your first flight where you kind of had one whole row across the plane maybe empty, this time each specific row on each side of the aisle had at least 1 or 2 people.
No, almost like, yeah, it's pretty much, I feel like it's probably at 50 or 60% capacity.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, so each row would have at least one person in it, on each side of the aisle. So okay, so that's the situation on the plane. I imagine you wore a mask and took precautions while you were on board.
Yeah.
Then now getting into the more interesting part. So 14, 15-hour flight, you land in Shanghai, and now the whole process of being received and going through the Chinese quarantine procedure begins. So what can you tell us about it?
It was very, very organized. I was very impressed. So business class, always goes out first, and then they allow us out, and then I just took my time. So they were letting people, they were letting everybody off the plane at the same time. But then, when you get off the plane, you go through the corridor, and there's another door. So they were only letting set amount of people out of that at a time. So I was with the last group. So I was at the very end. So we waited like maybe a good 15, 20 minutes just at that gate. And so once we go through, we did paperwork that says that we authorized the COVID testing. And then we got in the line to verify. And then we got in the line, and then we had to verify our name and then give them the sheet of paper that we signed. And then they gave us a number, and then we get a number, and then we go to the next part. So then we go to the next part, and then we go down, and then there's, with the piece of paper and the code and the number, that's our number, then we give it to, then there's like a room with like 20 technicians, right? 20 windows. So it was just a lot of, they were very organized. So yeah, it was like step 1, step 2, step 3. And then there were always like maybe at least 10 windows. So things were getting done, and people were,
So you could say it was a very streamlined process. You come in, they verify paperwork, they get everything done, they move you to the next phase, and then it's like, it's just incremental, and they had it wasn't just like one line for everyone. It's like once you got in, they had multiple people, multiple windows or booths ready to go. So it sounds like it was very expedited too.
Yeah, it was. So, we get the paperwork, we fill out the paperwork, we see somebody at a window that puts the information on the computer and then stick one of those barcode with number on that paper that you sign. And then we move on to the next place, where then you give that paper to the person. The person takes then take your swab of your throat and your nose, and then you move on to then customs, check your passport, and then you go out, you get your bag, And then once you get your bag, then you have to go into 2 groups. So then the 2 groups would be if you're a Shanghai resident or non-Shanghai resident. So then I go to the non-Shanghai resident group. So in the non-Shanghai resident group, there were, again, a lot of sections, right? Different sections where it breaks down by province. So most people that fly into Shanghai, they're from, specific provinces, because you wouldn't be from a province in the West.
Because they're not taking any flights there. So you have to come into one of the available ports or ports of entry.
Yeah. So then people that are not a resident of Shanghai has a choice of quarantine for 3 days in Shanghai and then 11 days in your own province. Or you can do all 14 days in Shanghai. So you have that option. And then for the Shanghai people, they have the option of 7-day hotel quarantine and then 7-day at-home quarantine. But your home quarantine, your home condition must meet certain requirements, I think. Like if you had your own room, you don't have people
and that makes sense. That
living
makes
with you,
sense.
I'm not. Yeah. So they have all these. They go through all these requirements, right? And then you get an approval for 7. So they call it 7+7, right? 7 hotel, 7 home. So where I'm at, I decided to do 3+11. So 3 days in Shanghai and 3 days in Zhejiang province.
And that's where you mentioned you're currently at now. So you did your 3 days, and then
right.
It took you to Zhejiang province, or in where you're at now. So I assume they took you by bus.
Yeah, so they did. So we waited for a very long time because each bus had to, they had to shovel people. So we waited for a very long time. We got on the bus, and it was just me and another guy in our group. So it was like a whole bus, and it was just 2 of us.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And then we got to the hotel.
How big was the bus?
It was like maybe like a 35-seater.
Okay, so medium-sized bus, and there's just a
medium
gentleman on the whole bus. That must have been a fun ride.
So imagine like this whole thing took about 4 hours because the plane landed around 6:30, and I didn't get to the hotel until like 10 something.
Well, given all the steps, that still doesn't sound that bad, just because you have to go. It's unlike during normal times where you just go through customs, you get out, and it maybe takes an hour to 2 hours depending on how busy it is. But
because the ride to the hotel probably took about 40 minutes as well. So
naturally, depending on where they're going to quarantine you in Shanghai, because the Shanghai metro area is quite large.
Yeah. So apparently, I think all the hotels that are currently holding quarantine people, they are only doing quarantine, so they're not even open for regular operation.
And that would make sense to eliminate the possibility of any cross contamination.
Yeah. So, and they were very, the staff, they were very kind. We got there at 10, and then the guy said, if you want me to help you order food, noodle, and there were only one option is the beef noodle soup. So it's like, okay, if you want beef noodle soup, I'll help you order it, bring it to you, and you can just pay me. And so that was very, it was very kind because they didn't have to do that, right? So we both said yes, and then within like 15-20 minutes, we had food. Yeah, so that was like the first night. So that was considered night 1. So I stayed in the first hotel for 3 nights. And then the 4th day, they picked us up at the hotel. So that night, around like 11 o'clock, I heard other people come in. So there were probably like other groups. So there were only 4 of us, actually. I found out, when we left, because we're not allowed to leave the room.
I imagine so. So and that's, and then do they like guard you in the rooms, or do they just or what did they do?
No, it was kind of like they didn't guard us, but there were cameras in the hallway, of course, but there's no guarding. It's just like, that's the rule. You're not allowed to leave the room. You're not allowed to visit your friends, even if you're in the same hotel. So there's a chair in the first hotel. There was a chair outside of each room where they drop off the food, and then when the food arrives, you come out, you pick it up, you open your door, pick it up, right? It's right at in front of your door. And then we got these yellow bags. That's it's labeled contaminated. So that's all of our trash goes into the yellow bag, and then we just put our yellow bags outside, and then they'll come and collect it every day.
As you mentioned, so very efficient.
Organized. Yeah, it was very organized, very efficient. And then every day they come twice in the day. So morning and afternoon to measure our temperature. And then once a day, the nurse calls the room to ask how we feel.
Well, that makes sense. They're basically monitoring you every day in case someone develops symptoms. Yeah. So, okay. So basically they had a protocol in place for providing you food, and then the nurses would call you every day. You also mentioned about outside of monitoring, do they actually come into the rooms every day as well and check on you?
They don't. So they just knock on the door. You open the door. They take your temperature at the door.
Okay, that's not too bad.
Yeah. So, but you're just in your room. So then, so day 4, the bus came, and then they called us down, right? And then this is another thing that I felt like they were very careful, because they said, okay, you need to pack your bags, and then you leave it outside your door, and then the workers will come to carry the bags, because they don't want us carrying heavy items or getting overheated. So we didn't even have to carry our bags. Yeah, to make sure that our temperature remained, normal. So that was really nice, because my bags were heavy. So
you got to turn any situation, anything positive. There you have it. You don't have to lug your tote all the bags.
Yeah. So we got on the bus, and there were only 4 of us. And then they said that they're going to go to the second hotel to pick up more people. So there were about 10 people that were transferred to this second location. So there were about 10 of us. Oh, wait, no, 14. Yeah, there were about 14 of us. And on the bus, we're not allowed to sit together as well. So each person had to sit by themselves. Yeah. So there were about 14 people. So we all got to this second hotel, which is a much better place. And then, so I realized there is also difference between from province to province, because the hotel here does it, there are similarities, but there are some differences as well. So they don't, there's not a nurse that calls me every day here. And then, the temperature check, they used to come twice. And then the guy said to us, well, most people are sleeping that early in the morning. So why don't you take your own temperature? And if there's any abnormalities, then call them. So then he just started coming once.
I see. Okay. So basically province to province, there's some minor adjustments or changes.
Yeah, there's very minor differences. But, the bag's the same. All right. They still drop off the food in front of the door at set times. And then
that makes sense. They need to have, it's easier to have one system in place that they do everywhere.
Yeah.
It's just, otherwise it was more administratively challenging to carry.
Yeah.
Okay.
So day 5, I had another COVID, no swab. So I got a no swab on day 5. And then yesterday or the day before, I can't remember, they came into the room and took a swab of the couch.
Okay.
Which wasn't on the paper. That test was not on the paper. So I was kind of like, okay, that's not on, because they gave us a document that lists all the testings that would be done to us. But I guess this is just, I don't know, maybe they're trying to see if there were things that were in the room. I don't know. So they took that. And then, I am right now, on day 12? Yeah, I'm day 12. So tomorrow they are supposed to come to get another nose swab and then a antigen, so a blood test. And then Saturday I go home.
Okay, so basically one more round of testing to verify, and then after that and then Saturday China time you'll be able to go back to your husband and husband's house finally see your kids.
Yeah. But then so each province can have their own regulations. So Zhejiang province regulation is, after your 14 days of hotel quarantine, you have to do a 7-day home quarantine also. So the next 7 days after Saturday, I will have to just stay home and then self-quarantine again at home, but I could have my family. And then they suggest that if I don't have to, I don't go out. But I'm definitely not allowed to return to work. And then at the end of the 7 days, at home, I have to do another COVID test.
Test after test after test after test.
It's a lot of testing. It's so many testing. I'm getting so used to the nose swab, it doesn't hurt anymore.
Yeah, because I remember when I had mine, the first time I had it done, it definitely made me cry a bit. But but at that
Yeah.
rate, you're definitely gonna get used to it. So in total, since tomorrow's your last, say your second to last day before you can go home, how many times have you been tested?
My goodness. Let's see, 2 in California, 1 in the airport, 1 on day 5. So already I've done 4. And then I've got 3 more to go.
So in total, 8 rounds of testing. Like you said, they'll do both the antigen and the swab. So
yeah.
in total, you'll most likely go through 8 rounds of testing once you're done, and you still haven't another 9 days before you're actually like, oh, I'm free again.
Yeah, and even when I was in the U.S. before the COVID for the test for the flight, I actually tested twice. One of those free examination areas, because I don't want to pay the $400 to find out, that I had or have, COVID. So I kind of, try to make sure that I don't have it before I pay the $400 for it, so I've done a lot of tests.
No doubt. I mean, I've done a number of tests, and I just got my vaccine recently, so I'm quite happy about that. But that's very thorough and
that's the other thing about the vaccine. The first thing that they asked me when I applied, when I asked the counselors, the embassy when I asked the embassy for approval, the first question they asked me was, did I get the Chinese vaccine? Before anything, there was like, did you get the Chinese vaccine? I feel like that might be one of those things for people to, if they want, like for people who are leaving China and wanting to return, that getting the Chinese vaccine would help them return in the future.
Well, I'm not sure about this, but I mean, I don't know if I could even get it here if I wanted to.
Yeah, they were saying, I don't know if it's true yet, but people were saying that the Chinese consulate will offer it.
Interesting. Yeah, because when I looked into getting it, all I've seen is here, at least in the U.S., is Pfizer, Moderna, or AstraZeneca, and then the Johnson & Johnson.
Yeah. So I think I heard someone, there were words, rumors, articles, whatever, saying that possibly that in the future
they may provide that for people wanting to return, and it may give them a little more of a streamlined, pathway.
Yeah. So they might just do it in-house where you'll just have to pay for it at the consulate, and then I don't know. I mean, but they care a lot about if you had their vaccine.
Oh, naturally, I think that's a larger issue we won't go into here. But but you bring up a good point, is that if someone has already had one of the non-Chinese vaccines, you still have to go through the quarantine process, I'm sure. But is there any difference?
No, right now, no difference.
But I imagine they have to do maybe another type of test to make sure that you actually have it, or have the vaccine.
Do. So right, yeah. So the test that the people that have taken the vaccine, so that has to be done on the state side, right? So that test costs a bit more. It's like the protein test. It includes the protein test, right? Because the vaccine is the injection of the protein. So yeah, so that is another test. So if you had the vaccine, you do a different COVID test than the people who had, like the one that I did.
I see. So basically, there's a slight modification with testing, but the general process and timeline is the same. You're still going to be quarantined. You're still going to be everything else that people who've not been vaccinated have to do as well. So so that's actually good for people to know, because they may think, oh, if I get a vaccine, it may make things easier. Well, no,
that's not. Yeah, it's not the case. It's all the same at this time.
Interesting. Well, that's just crazy. Mm-hmm. That's just crazy, because that's so different from what I've experienced here, or people I know have experienced. And I'm glad to hear it's very thorough and very well thought out. But at the same time, I think a lot of people, that'd be, especially here in the U.S., that'd be a little concerning to them, or a little like just a shock to the system.
What do you mean, like this much testing and monitoring?
Yes,
and
all that. I mean, I think a lot of people would.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people would agree that it's good that they're taking this seriously, but the amount of testing and monitoring, I think for a lot of people that would be a little intimidating or to, in an extreme case, potentially a little unsettling to even scary.
Yeah, I know, right? It is crazy to think about it, but when you're in the environment, you kind of just get so used to it, right? And you kind of just go with the flow with it, and you don't even think about it too
and
much.
it's not like it's not like you have any choice. So that's going to
No,
dictate
you
a lot
don't.
of things.
Right.
You have to follow the system in place,
Yeah.
so you naturally are going to do it. And if you don't want to, then
Right.
frankly, don't go to wherever you don't go. So, but no, that's just
it would just paranoid me too much. So I try not to think about it. I could do all that thinking when I'm back in the States.
No, but
while I'm here,
hearing your your experience in the process, it's just it's quite captivating in the fact that you have to go through all this work, and in many cases, once you're there, it's a lot of stuff to do, but it's very straightforward because you just have to follow the instructions and it's taken care of. But the getting ready to go, that was just, I could tell just from your tone of voice, that was what made you the most, upset and, concerned.
Yeah, I think the uncertainty of being able to return when you really had to return, I think that was probably the most stressful. Everything else was okay. I think just that one day, dealing with the embassy was the most stressful day. That's it.
No, and that makes perfect sense. Just because of, am I going to be able to come back? Everything's in flux, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And like you said, the policies and the rules continue to change, so you don't know if everything you prep for now is going to still hold up in a week or a month or maybe even days.
Yeah, I would have to say though, I feel like I don't know, like I don't know if the U.S. is allowing people with work visas to return.
I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to look into that, but that is a good question, because I know people are being able to get into the U.S., but I have not looked into the specifics of that.
Yeah, because one thing is like the policy is just not black and white. I feel like although they say that they are allowing the Chinese side, they're allowing people to return, but then they can reject. So it kind of makes it very ambiguous.
Good
so
word.
I was wondering.
This is a great word to describe that, because they give you instructions, but like your experience has shown, you can do everything and still get rejected, and you have to literally fight to get the. And in the case, if you didn't have kids or your husband in China, I doubt you would have probably been allowed to come back.
No, I feel like I wouldn't be able to come back. It's just not a strong enough of an argument. Or it really depends on whoever is handling the case, and be like, okay, that person has a visa, so it's like it's very ambiguous. And I wonder how the US policy is in comparison, where could someone just make an argument, a good argument, and then be allowed, or is it very by the book?
I imagine it's very much by the book, but I definitely think at the same time there is certainly a human element to it as well. So like you said, I think sometimes it does depend on who you talk to. Just like getting a normal visa, sometimes it may depend on who you talk to or the visa officer is. That I know very much from my own work experience with international students. That that really can depend, and sometimes people get rejected for stupid reasons or for random reasons.
Yeah. So anyways, I feel like it's a very good experience overall, and I feel like persistence. It shows me that persistence is very important.
As that old saying goes, persistence pays off. Sooner or later, you'll get what you need to do or get what you want.
Yeah, right. So
I think it's I really appreciate everything you've told us today, specifically kind of going through this process, and the human element in your personal battle to kind of get back to China to be with your husband and your two children, which you're almost there, but once just a couple more days, and then and then another week or so, and you'll be done with the quarantine process. But I just really want to appreciate you kind of bringing this into people's in the forefront of their minds, and generating awareness about what it's like if you do plan to go back to mainland China, if you can get back, what you'll have to go through and what the procedures at least now are like.
Yeah, and the key is persistence, because they will respond. Which I think that's very positive in this end.
And we can certainly state the one word for wanting to go back to China right now, if you're planning to, is persistence, as you've mentioned. Well, again, Jing, I really appreciate it. And, I think everyone who listens to this will be quite enlightened by the process and
Yes.
what you're going through as well. So I just wanted to thank you again and appreciate all the input you've provided, because as things do start to improve, at least somewhat this year, I think you're going to see this a lot more, and more people are willing to travel or are willing to take that chance, I would say. So, again, we really appreciate the time you've given us, and this has been another episode of International Immersion. Feel free to reach out to us at internationalimmersionpodcast@gmail.com. See our Instagram page of the same name and our Facebook page of the same name. And we'd love to hear your feedback, thoughts, and we're always looking for new topics and stories to tell. So feel free, and we'll gladly look at anything you send us. So this has been another episode, and we will see you on the next one. Take care and stay safe.